Origins, how mobile homes got anchored. To see why the trap works, we need to go back to when it looked like freedom on wheels. In the 1950s, the highway was a promise. Trailers rolled behind Chevys and Fords, parking in tidy rows called courts. Affordability was the hook, but mobility was the romance. Go where the work is, take your home with you. Small operators mowed the grass, fixed a pipe, waved at kids on bikes. Rent was a handshake and a coffee chat away. The parks grew on the edges of towns, close enough to clock in, far enough to stay unnoticed. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Trailers got heavier. Families settled. By the early 1970s, the government stepped in with a new national building code for manufactured housing. HUD tags went on new homes, standards went up, and the units stopped pretending they were campers. Skirting hid the wheels. Tie-downs and concrete pads kept storms from tearing lives out of the ground. The houses improved, and the anchor set. This is the split ownership model that would define everything that followed. Families own the structure, someone else owns the dirt. The romance of motion faded to a practical truth. You can change a couch, you can repaint the siding, but your foundation is a lease, and the signature on that lease isn't yours. Zoning politics did the rest. City councils didn't say get out. They said not here. Parks were pushed to fringes, tucked behind industrial corridors or along county roads. The land use is locked in. New parks were hard to approve and harder to finance. Over decades, that quiet discrimination baked in a scarcity that would become priceless to anyone holding the deeds. Ask the early owners what it felt like. Many were mom-and-pop landlords who lived nearby and ran the place like an extended block. They charged low rents because turnover hurt. They forgave a late fee because they saw the bruise or the layoff notice. Infrastructure sat under private control. Water lines that only they knew, septic systems with quirks, cracked roads that needed summer patches. None of this looked like Wall Street. It looked like a small business with a long memory. But there was one problem hiding inside this comfortable arrangement. The homes weren't actually moving. Towing a decades-old single-wide risked, splitting it along the seams. A double-wide meant disassembly and a precision dance back together. The physics of mobility gave way to the economics of staying put. Over time, that reality hardened into leverage, even if the first generation of owners rarely used it. Everything was about to change when the numbers guys realized what the lease had become. If you own the ground under a neighborhood that can't pick up and leave, and if replacing that ground is nearly impossible because new parks don't get built, you don't manage tenants, you manage cash flows. What nobody knew at the time, standing over a broken water main or tuning up a lawn tractor, was that the pad beneath each porch could be modeled like a bond. 3 details turned into a thesis. First, inelastic demand. People needed the space to keep their home. The home had no cheaper alternative. Second, low capital expenditures. You weren't renovating kitchens in dozens of units. You were maintaining pipes, roads, and a rule book. Third, forced retention. Move-out costs weren't a truck and a weekend. They were thousands of dollars, permits, and a new vacant pad you might never find. Meanwhile, local politics kept doing their slow, relentless work. When new subdivisions argued about traffic and schools, parks faced something simpler: stigma. Manufactured housing was branded other, tax base light, image heavy. Every meeting that stalled a permit somewhere else tightened the moat around existing communities. The unintended consequence of protecting neighborhoods was to fix the supply of land under these homes almost in place. Inside the homes, people built lives because permanence snuck in. Babies learned to walk on vinyl flooring. Veterans hung service photos. Seniors planted roses by the steps. You could call it a trailer, but the roots were real, and everyone knew it when storms hit or when a neighbor died and casseroles lined the sidewalk. Then the country changed. Wages flattened. Rents in cities clumped. Manufactured homes stayed, for millions the last. Rung of ownership within reach. That demand didn't just hold, it grew. Early owners aged. Their kids often didn't want the business. The handshake era met the letter of intent email. Brokers started calling with offers that moved fast and required no repairs. The price wasn't just for land and pipes. It was for captive demand, documentable on a spreadsheet. Here's where the original idea of mobile turned into the quiet hinge. Moving a home was theoretically possible, but practically, it was a trip most couldn't afford. The industry had matured into something stable, almost hidden. The families owned their walls. The landlords owned the dirt. Zoning kept the circle small. And the lease, those few pages renewed year after year, held more power than anyone at those 1950s courts could have imagined. To understand the trap in today's notice, the 40% that blows up a month's budget, we had to see how mobility got anchored by code, by concrete, and by politics. The form didn't just evolve, it calcified. And once it did, the next chapter wrote itself. Someone would monetize the anchor. The perfect PE asset, captive customers, and predictable cash flow. Everything lined up for someone who spoke in basis points. You had homes that couldn't easily leave, land that almost never got replaced, and leases that could do more work than drywall ever could. That's when the pitch decks started circulating. Apollo-linked Inspire communities, Blackstone's treehouse communities, Carlyle platforms and family offices you've never heard of. The language was tidy. Low capex, inelastic demand, stable yield. What nobody on the porch saw that day was the slide that made it obvious. Each pad was a coupon that matured every month. Here's the spine of the thesis. First, the mobile myth was baked into pricing power. Moving a manufactured home wasn't a Saturday errand. It averaged about $9,000, and a double-wide could run $15,000 to $20,000 for full-service relocation. That's disassembly, transport, permits, setup, utilities. Every step designed for specialists with invoices to match. You can't click relocate on a website and comparison shop your way out of a rent hike. So, churn stayed low by design, not by chance. Second, the capital plan didn't require granite counters. The operator owned roads, water lines, sewer laterals, common areas, the bones, not the finishes. Dollars went into infrastructure maintenance, compliance, and enforcement rather than unit-by-unit rehabs. On a spreadsheet, that meant predictable operating expenses and fewer surprises per door. If you can hold OPEX steady while raising revenue, the math writes its own ending. Third, zoning turned into a moat you didn't need to landscape. New parks face neighbors, planning boards, and a stigma that slows or stops approvals. Even when a city says yes, lenders and insurers ask hard questions. So supply froze across many regions. That scarcity wasn't an accident. It was policy, layered over decades by people who thought they were preserving neighborhoods. For an acquirer, scarcity became a feature to be monetized. The playbook is simple enough to fit on an index card. Acquire from a retiring owner at a cap rate that reflects undermarket rents. Within 60 to 120 days, align to market, which means step the pad rent 20 to 70%, depending on what the region will bear and the comps your broker can wave around. Add billbacks, submeter water, pass through sewer and trash. Enforce rules that were once soft, yard standards, vehicle limits, no subletting. The tone shifts from neighbor to operator, and the balance sheet tightens its grip. Meanwhile, the financing is its part. If property value is a function of net operating income, every extra dollar of rent expands the appraised value by a multiple. Raise the NOI, refinance at better terms, pull out cash, repeat. Bridge loans and interest-only periods give time for the rent reset to season. Covenants push growth targets. In a 3 to 7 year window, you've either sold at a higher price or refinanced again to roll the equity into the next portfolio. Raise, refi, repeat isn't a slogan. It's the treadmill that keeps the debt engine humming. The sales pitch to investors leans into weatherproof metaphors. Recession-resistant. Fragmented space ripe for consolidation. Stable mid-single-digit yield with inflation hedge. The decks nod to fragmentation. Tens of thousands of parks, many still mom and pop, then promise discipline. Standardized leases, central billing, regional managers, fee schedules. Blackstone's large-scale buying after 2018 signaled that the category wasn't fringe anymore. It was institutional. What nobody in those rooms had to say out loud was the human mechanism that made the underwriting work. If a family can't shoulder a $9,000 move, they will prioritize pad rent over almost everything else. They'll juggle prescriptions, overtime, food choices, and school supplies before they risk default. That's not cruelty in a memo. It's a probability in a cell that ripples through a waterfall model. When a resident does fall behind, the paperwork has levers, late fees, notices, and in too many leases, an abandonment clause that lets the park take control of the home after eviction or default. The asset doesn't just hold a line on rent. It can capture the structure itself and cycle it back into the sales funnel. There are moments in every deal where the operators bet on silence. They assume residents won't organize in 90 days. They bank on city attorneys lacking bandwidth to enforce weak statutes. They count on the invisibility of parks to the press unless something catches fire. And most of the time, they're right. That invisibility is part of the attraction. You can harvest yield from behind a hedge. From the other side, a few people did see the machine assembling. Smaller syndicators copied the majors, promising investors a chance to ride along. Family offices liked the downside protection story. Pension funds, investing through private equity vehicles, were told their retirees' money would find steady shelter in workforce housing. The irony didn't slow the capital. It amplified it. Back on the porch, none of this helped with the math. But this is how a notice becomes an instrument. The anchor under the home, the scarcity beyond the fence, the clause in the lease, the refinance waiting on the other side. It's one system. And to the funds that assembled it, each family's decision to pay this month isn't personal. It's predictable. The roll-up wave, from mom and pop to mega fund. While that financing treadmill spun in boardrooms, a quieter machine started up on kitchen tables. Brokers built lists the old-fashioned way, county records, tax rolls, rumor networks about who is nearing retirement. Then the mailers landed. We buy communities. Fast close. No repairs. Keep your legacy. Cold calls followed with numbers ready and a promise to spare owners the headache of spring potholes and winter burst lines. For operators who'd carried wrenches for decades, the pitch had gravity. Take chips off the table, avoid capital gains with a 1031 exchange, hand the headaches to professionals. 3 days earlier, someone had slipped a letter under an office door in a park like this one. It offered a cap rate that assumed undermarket rents, and a due diligence period so short it felt like a dare. The buyer would pay cash, or so the broker said, and close before the next rent cycle. The seller's son, who lived in another state and didn't want the business, sent back a yes before lunch. That's how many of these stories start, not with schemes, but with fatigue and timing. Unknown to them, across town, a different park got almost the same letter from a different platform. The names changed. Some were REITs with investor calls, some were private funds with quiet LPs, but the playbook was aligned. After 2018, Blackstone's surge into manufactured housing sent a signal that others heard. Carlyle-affiliated groups, Apollo-linked Inspire communities, regional syndicators flying under radar, all fed a broker pipeline that standardized outreach. Offers weren't handwritten. They were templated, pre-approved, and stacked with terms the mom and pops rarely saw from local buyers. This was the moment everything changed, one former owner told us. The buyer didn't just purchase a property, they rolled it into a portfolio. Suddenly, leases that had lived in file drawers for years were swapped for thick packets drafted by central counsel. Rules matched across states. Late fees snapped to a schedule. Professional management arrived with computer systems and regional supervisors who'd never set foot on these streets till acquisition day. Portfolio bundling made everything downstream cheaper. Debt got priced on the aggregate, not the one-off risk of a park with a finicky well. Insurance brokers negotiated master policies. Vendors signed multi-park contracts. The savings didn't show up as lower rents. They showed up as headroom for the NOI to expand when those standardized rents hit. And every extra dollar in one park amplified the refinance math across the stack. National comps did their next trick. A manager could point to market rate, numbers pulled from cities an hour away, or from nearby parks already reset by the same operator. Local context, older residents, fixed incomes, the lack of vacant pads for 50 miles, fell out of the spreadsheet. The story became consistency. Bring these sites into alignment. If that created a shock, the documentation justified it. This is what the market bears. The market, of course, was partly defined by the same firms citing it. Meanwhile, small owners trying to hold the line faced a new kind of arms race. Tenants would show them notices from the next park over and ask if a sale was coming here, too. Banks started to look at exit plans when renewing loans. Was the property institutional ready? Title companies learned the rhythm of 1031 timelines and expedited closings. What used to take months could wrap in weeks. You didn't just sell to a neighbor, you sold into a machine. Regional monopolies grew quietly. An operator might control 4 parks within commuting distance, each with its own branding but one back office. If you got pushed out of one, your application to the next met the same screening window and the same rent sheet. If your home was older, some parks wouldn't take it at all. Residents felt the invisible fence even when the highway ran wide open beside them. Here's where it gets personal. A park manager who'd known birthdays and grandkids retired the day after the sale. The new team landed with clipboards and a calendar. They weren't cruel, they were trained. They had quotas, lease-up targets, timelines for rule compliance. When a tenant asked for a grace period because the pension check hit on the 5th, the answer shifted from, "I'll work with you," to "That's not our policy." That single line flips safety into risk, and you can measure it in evictions over time. What nobody knew at the time was how quickly culture could flip. The roll-up didn't just streamline operations. It scrubbed away the informal safety net that had made parks livable under stress. In its place, a standardized engine marched: assess, adjust, automate. And because the residents' homes couldn't easily move, and because new parks weren't opening to absorb pressure, the consolidation didn't face a market check. It fed on fragmentation until the fragments belonged to a few names and a few dashboards. Back at the porch with the 40% notice, this is the line that connects. That paper isn't an isolated act of one ambitious buyer. It's the outcome of a decade-long roll-up that turned scattered, idiosyncratic communities into assets coordinated across states and funds. From the first mailer to the last lease, the wave carried mom-and-pop shores under a tide they never saw coming. The rent shock, how hikes happen and why they stick. While that was happening in boardrooms, life inside the park shifted by calendar. 60 days after the sale, envelopes arrived. The letterhead had a new logo and a phrase that showed up 3 times: aligning to market. The number beneath it jumped 20, 30, sometimes 70%. Not a gradual climb, a step. Managers were told to keep a calm tone. We're standardizing with regional rates. Residents heard the same words and saw the same math. Rent due on the 1st, late on the 4th, $5 per day penalties after that. What nobody knew at the time was how many levers would move in sync. Alongside the rent, a separate insert listed utility normalization. The park had paid water before. Now, submetering meant residents paid every gallon, plus a monthly service fee. Sewer and trash? Itemized, with administrative charges the old owner had absorbed. A storage lot that had been first come for old trailers turned into rentable spaces with gate codes and line item pricing. The promise on paper said transparency. The effect at the kitchen table was a higher bottom line, no matter how much you conserved. Then the rules clicked tighter. Leases arrived with more pages than anyone remembered. No subletting without written approval. Exterior standards with photo checklists. 2 vehicles per lot. 3rd requires a paid permit. Guest passes for overnights. The old grace period vanished. If your Social Security cleared on the 5th, you needed a plan. Managers, many new to the property, were trained to repeat it. We enforce the lease. That sentence sounded neutral until a truck broke down, until a kid got sick, until a paycheck slipped by a weekend. From their perspective, the operators called this professionalization. It came with spreadsheets of delinquency targets and recovery timelines. Late fees added up fast. Miss 1 payment and you owed rent plus penalties. Miss 2 and the ledger looked like a slope you couldn't climb. Notices posted on doors used formal language. Demand to cure, intent to terminate. The park didn't have to shout. It just had to measure days. Here's where the trap showed its teeth. People asked, could we just move? The answer sat in a binder of quotes. A single-wide full service, within the county, thousands. A double-wide, disassembly and reinstallation, permits, utility reconnection. $15,000 to $20,000. Even the low end, about $9,000 on average, might as well have been $90,000 for a family with 2 weeks of savings. And that was before the next hurdle, finding a pad. Calls to nearby parks circled back to the same companies, the same rent sheets, and the same line: no vacancies, or no homes older than a certain year. A father of 3 pulled out a yellow legal pad and did the math the night his notice arrived. Pad rent up by 40%. Water now billed, estimated from last month's usage. 2 cars, 1 extra fee. He called movers out of hope, not expectation, and learned what others already knew. There's no DIY when you're unbolting a house from anchors. The quote landed at $12,800 without surprises. He had $900 in savings and a credit card already carrying a balance from a break job. He circled 2 options: pay the hike or walk. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the fine print. The lease added clauses that looked like housekeeping but carried weight. If you fell behind and received an eviction, and if the home was deemed abandoned after a short window, the park could take possession under state procedures. A rent-to-own addendum for a park-owned unit required maintenance like an owner, but offered none of the title protections. In practice, missing payments didn't just risk a court record, it threatened the equity in the walls around you. Managers knew the power of that threat, even if they never said it aloud. At the end of the month, residents who'd never missed a payment before lined up with money orders and questions they already knew the answers to. Is there any way to phase this in? Can I pay water quarterly? The answers were scripts. The shock wasn't an accident, it was the mechanism. Appraisals looked forward to a new NOI. Lenders waited for a seasoned rent roll. Each notice posted on each door was part of a timeline to the refinance. Not everyone cracked. A few neighbors compared letters and spotted errors, incorrect meter reads, fees not allowed under state law. They pushed back and won small corrections. But the structure held because the exit didn't. Even those who wanted to resist had to sleep somewhere next month. The raise landed, the ledger adjusted, and the portfolio upstream ticked a sell from yellow to green. For families under these roofs, aligning to market wasn't a sentence in a deck. Leases ruled.